طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we continue with the Aqeeda course. And I usually would take this day off, but if I do, then we're probably not going to make it till, we're not going to finish on time. So I'm going to try and I had to kind of continue on this Monday, just so hopefully we finish sometime early August to give time for people to prepare. And then for those who want to write the exam, that they have time at the end of the summer before school starts to get that done. The articles of Iman are six. Everyone knows what the arkan of Iman are. أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره من Allah. To accept or find Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His angels, His prophets, His books, the day of judgment, and then predestination or qada and qadar. And we talked about Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've covered that over the last number of sessions, and that's kind of what it is the bulk of the of this course. But we're going to cover the rest of the five articles, and we're going to focus a little bit, probably the most time, on al-qada al-qadar because of its significance and its importance. Everything's important here, but this probably takes the most effort and energy. So moving on, we're going to talk about, first of all, the issue of Iman increasing and decreasing. And this is an important issue for you to be aware of, that scholars have argued this or debated this a little bit over time. What does Iman increase or decrease, or is it just a set value? Meaning, if you understand the word Iman as in a belief, just a belief, then it's really, there's no space for it to grow or to increase or decrease. Either you believe it or you don't. It's a yes or no question. But Iman is not seen to be that. Iman is seen to be something that is much more dynamic. It's something that can increase, that can decrease in nature. And aside from the bulk or the majority of Muslim scholars historically, that's how they understood it. The Maturidiyya and the Mu'tazila are the two groups that disagreed with that. And the reason they disagreed with Iman being something that increases or decreases because of the way they defined the word Iman. So the majority of scholars and of theology defined Iman as being three things: as being cognitive acceptance, meaning mentally you have accepted a fact or you've accepted a specific narrative; vocal affirmation, meaning you vocalize it or you affirm it in terms of your belief system. You don't hold back, and you align your practices, meaning you practice based on that. And because of that, they saw Iman to be something that increases or decreases, because that's those three things. There's room for increase and decrease. The Maturidiyya, they don't define Iman that way. They define it as cognitive acceptance and vocal affirmation. So that you accept it, you say La ilaha illallah, that's it, that's Iman. They don't see amal, they don't see practices to have anything to do with Iman, which is why, and because of that, they don't think Iman increase or decrease. So it's just based on definition. The problem I have, and I did, I think, maybe a 12 session khawatir after Isha, I think last year or so, talking about the concept of Iman, is that the way that it's translated is in English to the word belief. It's a very poor translation. That's not what it means in Arabic, and it's definitely not what it means for Muslims. To have Iman is not to believe something. In the Western context, to believe something means to accept a narrative that has no evidence to support it, and that is most likely not true. That's what belief is. I'm going to believe something, meaning I'm going to accept something that someone said or a fact that is being stated, even though there's no evidence to support it at all. I just believe it. I just believe it. That's not what Iman means in Arabic or Islamically at all. That's not what the word refers to. Iman is, and this is the best way I can explain it to you, is internalizing the understanding of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a manner that guides behavior. This is my definition of it. And of course, the definition is based on what it means in Arabic, right? I'm just trying to put it in words that, in the English language in a way that makes sense. Iman is when you internalize the acceptance. You have looked and you have concluded, La ilaha illallah. The narrative that we have as Muslims and the way the Quran explains it is that your belief or your acceptance or your Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll use the word belief as a synonym to Iman if you accept that this is the actual definition of it. So you don't use the word belief in the Western context, but rather based on this definition that I just gave you. That you conclude your the acceptance of La ilaha illallah not from the Quran. The Quran tells you that you have to reach that conclusion from the world around you. I mean, you're going to reach your conclusion of La ilaha illallah from the universe and from life and from history and from your experience as a human being and being alive. These are the sources of your Iman. The Quran is not a source of iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At least not in its primal sense, not in the primal sense of it all. Quran is a source of iman in Allah in terms of his attributes, describing him to you, explaining exactly who he is subhanahu wa ta'ala, so you understand all the aspects. But basic acceptance of the one of the creator and the oneness of the creator comes from observations of the world around you, not from the Quran. And that's where the Quran sends you. The Quran keeps on asking you to go look elsewhere. أَفَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا أَوَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قُلْ سِيرُوا فَانْظُرُوا. This is how the Quran keeps on repeating the same thing. You have to go look. That's where you're going to find this your iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you find that, then what iman Islamically becomes, what the meaning of iman Islamically becomes, is to internalize that understanding in a way that guides your behavior, that allows you to make choices. I mean, it becomes the source of your decision-making process. That is what iman is. That's why when the Arab, the Bedouins, they said, قالت الأعراب آمنا. They said آمنا. Right? It's in Surah Al-Hujurat, the ayah. The answer from Allah is قل لم تؤمنوا. Say, Muhammad, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, say, لم تؤمنوا. You have not achieved iman yet. ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. But say, we have entered into Islam. We gave Shahadat Tawheed, entered into Islam. But iman is a degree that is a bit more deep. You gave your Shahadat Tawheed, you said La ilaha illallah. You still have to internalize that in a way that guides your behavior. And if you don't do that, then you don't really have iman yet. So when we're talking about iman, we're not just talking about you being told facts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or being given a narrative about Allah and the malaik and the kutub. But no, it's not just that. It's your ability to take all that information and internalize it so that it becomes the source or becomes the stem, the root of how you process, of how you make your decisions, of how you decide to live your life. That's what iman actually means. And based on that, iman will increase and decrease because we internalize these understandings differently. We all know that's the way we live our lives because your children don't learn the rule that you give them from the first time you tell it to them. You have to repeat the rule once and twice and 3 times and 4 times and 5 times. At a certain point as an adult, you start getting frustrated because you're like, this is not normal. 10 times should have been enough for you to internalize this very simple concept that I'm asking you to do. It's a very simple thing you need to remember. And what's the response is always, I forgot. So, and this is the raw experience of life. I forgot. And then after a while, if you're an Arab dad, you say, you forgot, Mashi, I'll find a way to make sure you remember next time. And then you go find a tree of some sort that has a nice branch, and then they'll never forget again. So the issue of internalizing the concept that you've explained to them. But that's how human beings are. It takes a while for things to sink in. They don't sink in really quickly. So this like a young man and a young woman, it will take a child will take a time before they can internalize certain, that's why you have to reinforce. That's why in education, what is the key? The key is reinforcement. You keep on reinforcing the same idea, keep on repeating it time and time again. Talk about it from 5, 6 different angles. It'll sink in. We still, as adults, need the same thing. And iman, the more you internalize it, the higher the iman. The less you internalize it, the less the iman. So it's not just the acceptance of the narrative; it's also how much you internalize it and how much that guides your decision-making process. And that's really probably the most important piece. Okay, so let's start by talking about iman and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's malaika. So the most important piece is that this is an aspect of ghaib. And most aspects of iman are of ghaib, not all of them, but most of them are. The greatest aspect of iman of ghaib is what? Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. He is the greatest ghaib. What is ghaib? Ghaib is the unseen. Or ghaib is that which does not exist within the observable universe, or that which is beyond the realm of time-space that we are in. Anything that's not within, something that we don't have the ability to measure, something that we don't have the ability to observe, something that we don't have the ability to impact. That is ghaib. Right? And a part of our faith, or part of Islam, is understanding that there are two forms of existence. There's shahada, alam shahada, the world of the unseen, the observable cosmos, and everything that's in it, and everything that is contained within it, that you can observe and you can measure and you can learn from, you can impact and can impact. And then alamul ghaib, the world of the unseen, that which we don't have that relationship with. We cannot. That's why, to search for the proof, the word proof here is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never going to happen. There'll never be an equation that equals God. Even if they come up with it, then that whatever it equals is not God, because it's impossible. He is not a part of the seen world. Equations only work within this realm. It's only here. Everything that you can build an equation around, anything that you can learn to observe, it's not going to be him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, or else he's contained in here with us. If he's trapped in the cosmos with us, then he's not God anymore. So whatever you prove something, but it's not God. I don't know what it is though. You'll figure it out, but it's not God. So when this is obviously a pet peeve of mine that I've ranted about many times, and I lost a lot of support from locally and internationally, and those who know, is that when you claim that somehow you can diagnose something that is unseen or a part of ghaib, or that you've figured out how to affect the ghaib, or how that you're selling illusions. Like you're playing with fire, and this is cult-like behavior. We don't know. We don't have that ability to know any of these things. And there's a lot of ghaib, not just the malaika or ghaib. Al-jinn is ghaib to us, and al-hasad and ayn and sihr, all these things, the effect of them, their effect is ghaib. Doesn't mean that they don't exist. Malaika exist. I'm just saying that they're ghaib. I mean, you're never going to catch one of the malaika on camera, ever. There's never going to be a camera that's just, and then somehow a malaika goes by, we catch it and we frame it. Malaika. No, ya habibi, no. How do we know? Because it's ghaib. Because by definition, they're not going to show up on this. It's just impossible. The only one, if you're seeing malaika, then you're either you need to see a psychiatrist or see God very soon. One of two things, because only the prophets ﷺ got to see him in the malaika. That's why they're prophets. Like the whole point of them being rusul, messengers and prophets, is that they got to see the malaika. The rest of us, if we're going to see a malaika, it's not going to be in the malaika form. وَلَوْ جَعَلْنَاهُ مَلَكًا لَجَعَلْنَاهُ رَجُلًا وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ. If we're going to show you malaika, we're going to have them they're going to come to you in the form of a man and dressed like a man, meaning you would never know otherwise. If you're going to see the malaika in the form that Allah created them, then you're a prophet. And if you're not a prophet, then you just kind of drop it. Doesn't mean that they don't exist. It doesn't mean that they don't have effect. It doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not grant them the ability to do things that affect your life. No, for sure. But this pursuit of ghaib is to me is pathological. It's a problem. It's a mental health problem, in my opinion. It's stemmed in an issue that it lacks understanding of our deen. Like you want to understand you're not permitted in Islam, obligated in Islam, allowed in Islam to pursue ghaib, to pursue the measurement or the of ghaib. This is not your job. He did not ask you to do this, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have the tools to do it. It's a waste of your time and is going to eventually harm you. So you have to stay away from it. What do we know of ghaib? Only that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about ghaib. If He told us nothing about the ghaib, we would know nothing about ghaib. It's as simple as that. We only know about ghaib, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about it. The universe, when you look at the universe and history and time and life and all of that, what you conclude is that there is someone who put this all in motion. That's all you really conclude. Someone who was much stronger than you, who was much more knowledgeable than you, because what he produced with that movement is something that you and I would never be able to put out ourselves. That's as far as it goes. But that's an important conclusion to draw. That is the basis of all of this. The basis of all of this, and then everything else that we know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about God, is going to come to us through revelation. We're going to be taught. He's going to teach us. And if He didn't teach us subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we wouldn't be held accountable for it. And that's the important thing. So ghaib, I don't know. How would I know about the malaika? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not explain and tell us in the Quran about them and who they are, so we'd know nothing. So just stick to whatever it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained to you and be happy with that. Angels are creations that do not have our freedom of choice. They have freedom of choice, it's not ours. The margin that I have in freedom of choice has a chunk that's added, where I could say no, where I can disobey, where I can sin, where I can cause harm. They have a spectrum of freedom of choice. It's just that piece is not there. They can make choices. It's just not the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sin and harm is not within that margin. In life, it's not just choosing between doing good and bad. No, it's choosing between a lot of other stuff. Actually, the majority of choices in your life are neither good nor bad. They're just mubah. They're just permissible. Just things you do. I don't care what color shirt you buy, or where you decide to park your fanny and sit down and have a chat, or what you put in your tea. This doesn't all mubah. It doesn't matter. The majority of your life choices are just permissible, kind of whatever. Do whatever you want. And then there's a very small margin, a slither of a margin where you're doing things that are helpful, important. Obviously, if you live your life that way, then it becomes an umbrella concept. We'll talk about it, inshallah, in a different setting. And then choices that are harmful or sinful. The malaika just don't have that slither. That's all. It's not there. It's not like they want to do it, but they can't. It's just not an option for them. Just like it's not an option for you to decide that you're bored, so you're going to just grow wings and fly out of the place, or decide that you're going to, you see, there are things, it's not like you're deprived, oh, I want to teleport, but I can't. It's never an option. It's not something that you really think about because you just don't do. It's not a part of who you are. And the malaika, the same thing for them. And we know that why, because you read the Quran, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, they didn't all take it well. They had questions. I want to say they had objections, but it sounded like it if you're listening to the way that the ayah is saying. They said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to put on the earth someone who is going to spread corruption and shed blood while we continue to sing your praise and glorify you and exalt you? Sounds like an objection. It's not really an objection, but it's a question. They have concerns. The way we see malaika sometimes is like the robots. And they just go and they do whatever they have to do. That's not what malaika are. No. Malaika are capable of learning and thinking and questioning things. They just don't have that margin of freedom of disobedience and sin that we do, which is why we're very different. We have that. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing that we have. We can turn to God and say, nope, I'm not doing it. I don't want to listen. Other creatures look around and say, what? You're insane. What do you mean? Why? How? Based on what? And why would you say that to begin with? And it just makes no sense to them, right? Which is why it's a very tricky balance that we are living here. They serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways we are told about and other ways that we're not told about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us about the malaika in different places. وَالذَّارِيَاتِ ذَرْوَا فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا فَالْجَارِيَاتِ يُسْرًا فَالْمُقَسِّمَاتِ أَمْرًا. And you'll find other verses that talk about the malaika and what they do. Certain things are explained to us of their roles, and others aren't. One of their roles is that they bring us the revelation, right? Jibreel. Another one is Malak al-Maut, the angel of death, the one who takes the spirits and the souls, and we know. And other things they do that he doesn't tell us about, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's fine. We do not know their numbers, and we don't really know their forms. Not really. There are some narrations here and there. They're unclear. They're not decisive, and they're not conclusive. You can't really take and depict from these narrations exactly what a malaika looks like. And you're not supposed to, because they're ghaib, right? So the idea of, and of course, if you go to churches and stuff, you'll find that Christian and even non-Christian, really, artists have tried to depict and illustrate and draw malaika. And they may come up with stuff that are just based on, we don't know. We have no idea. And it's actually not helpful to try and imagine something that you can't imagine and you're not really familiar with. We know that they are created of light. Just like you come from the soil of the earth and the spirit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they come from light. It's only one thing. There's no mix. For there's a mix. It's soil and water. There's a teen, right? The problem with Iblis is like, well, I'm fire, you're light. What is this? He stinks. What is this? What is this? Look at it. Look how why would he be created this way? One of Iblis's problem, you can understand why Adam mattered. They were very pure in their creation, what they were. And Adam was this very weird thing that he didn't understand, right? So that there's this kind of, and we'll talk about this, inshallah, a little bit later on in the course. They have intellect. They have the ability to communicate. So we know that about them. They have other abilities which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them to perform certain tasks for him subhanahu wa ta'ala, which sometimes we understand, sometimes we don't. They bring good thoughts and intentions in contrast to shaitan. So a lot of the good khawatir that come to you, the waridat, they're called. Like if you get a nice thought or a nice, some of these will be granted to you by one of the malak. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send the malak to give you a nice thought or something khair, meaning you're sometimes sitting down and feeling bad and a nice thought pops into your mind. A feeling of love, a feeling of mercy, of compassion. You remember someone that you haven't spoken to in a long time and you have the kind of an urge to maybe do something nice for them. It's an urge to help you along. You want to be a good person. Sometimes you need a little bit of here's a nudge. Here's a nudge to help you. And then you decide whether you're going to do it or not at the end. But those nudges that we get that have khair in them are from the malaika. Just like the nudges we get for shar are from the shayateen and from our nafs as well, obviously, from both. That's Iman and his angels. That's really all I need you to know about for this course. There's a lot more to talk about on this topic, but for the purpose of a primary course, and also in terms of having just sound Iman, that's all you need to know. You're not required to really know anything else aside from this or any of the difference of opinion on anything else. So this is more than enough. Iman and his prophets, alayhimu salatu wassalam ajma'in. So we're obligated to believe in the prophecy of Allah's messengers and prophets, all of them. We are obligated to accept as Muslims يعني قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون فإن آمنوا بمثل ما آمنتم به فقد اهتدوا وإن تولوا فإنما هم في شقاق فسيكفيكهم الله. So and this is repeated again in Surah Al-Imran. قل آمنا بالله وما أنزل علينا وما أنزل على إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى والنبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم. We are told, you tell them that our narrative should be that we have iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything that was revealed to us and everything that was revealed to Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq and Yaqub and all the prophets that came from Ibrahim later on and Musa and Isa and all the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't draw any lines between them. We don't differentiate between them. We don't say one is good, one is bad. We have no tools to measure any of it. We accept them all, and if people do that, then they have accepted what we. So we accept Muhammad alayhi salatu prophecy and every other prophet. You're obligated, absolutely obligated, to accept the prophecy of all 25 named in the Quran, and these are biblical prophets. Most of them you find in the Old Testament and the New Testament, aside from maybe Hud and Salih. Right? Maybe Dhul Kifl, maybe Shu'aib, with some difference of opinion. These ones were not were not biblical, but we have 25 names in the Quran in terms of prophets. You're obligated to believe and accept the prophecy of all of them. You're also obligated to accept the prophecy of other prophets that you don't know about. قد أرسلنا رسلا من قبلك منهم من قصصنا عليك ومنهم من لم نقصص عليك. We have sent many prophets before you, some of them whom we have told you the stories of, and some of them whom we have not told you the stories of. Meaning, the Quran is very clearly, explicitly saying that there are many prophets you don't know about. And that is how we understand the world, by the way. Every major religion in the world, for us, is a religion that originated from a prophet of God, a messenger that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. His message, whoever it is, just got manipulated over time and turned into something that was different. So when we look at Buddhism, for example, or Hinduism, or Confucianism, any of these isms that have like historical data, the way we look at them as Muslims is that these are prophets who came and brought books and taught their people, and then the message got manipulated over time. And that's how we look at all of these. So, and the example of that, just so that you kind of the context here is nice. In the maybe 4th Islamic century, when the Muslims had made it as far as India in the east, going in the Futuhat, they ran into the Buddhists, and they didn't know what to do. So they sent back the guys who were there, because they're organizing the counties and territories. These are people who have a faith that they've never heard of before. It's not Hadu or Nasara or Sabi'in or Majus. It's none of this. So they were sent back saying to the closest scholars in Iran at the time were the Maliki scholars. They said, what do we do with them? So they said, we can't really answer your questions. Send us one of their preachers or someone so we can listen to them. So they did. They sent to them 2 or 3 of their speakers. They listened to them. And the fatwa was that hum min ahl kitab. They were treated as Ahl Kitab. The Buddhists in the 4th Islamic century, I'm talking 1,000 years ago, were treated as people of Ahl Kitab. Al-Majus, Al-Majus were treated within the Islamic Khilafah as Ahl Kitab as well. What does Ahl Kitab mean? Ahl Kitab mean are people who have a book. What mean a book? Mean they have a law. A law of any sort. Just they have a law. Meaning they have a way to organize their behaviors. There are things there's an ethical code that they adhere to that organize their marriages and their divorces and their births and deaths and ownership and all that stuff. So you have to have a book. So for the Muslims, that's really how we see it. Every group that have a law are Ahl Kitab. And we believe that law originates into a prophet who taught exactly what all the other 25 prophets in the Quran taught. We don't believe that any prophet brought from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anything different. No. They all brought the exact same message of La ilaha illallah, of Tawheed. The same general creed, the same Aqeeda. This Aqeeda that I'm teaching you right now is the Aqeeda that every prophet going back to Adam alayhi salam taught. This is the most authentic narrative you will ever hear in your life, because this has never changed. You come attend my fiqh Shafi'i or fiqh Hanbali? No, that's different. That's we were back 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. If we were with the right, we would have a different jurisprudence. Aqeeda if you're following the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's always been the same. There's never been any difference. None of the prophets came and said anything different. And how do I know that? Go read, open the Quran. إذ قال لهم نوح أخوهم نوح ألا تتقون إني لكم رسول أمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون وما أسألكم عليه من أجر. In أجر, you'll find the same little cliche at the beginning of each maybe a story in 5 stories. All the prophets came and said the same thing. Indeed, I am a trustworthy messenger. So be mindful of Allah and obey Allah. And I don't want any money from you. I want nothing from you. This is just for your. Why? Because the reason that the Quran repeats it, because sometimes students look, why is it the same thing? It's trying to establish a pattern that all of the prophets taught the exact same thing. None of them came and gave something that was different. The laws they brought differed, for sure. And this is an interesting field of study, by the way, that is in I'tiqad. We're not going to cover it in this primary course, but it's an interesting field within Aqeeda, is understanding the different laws that they brought. And we, as Muslims, also incorporate their laws. So if you go and you study usul al-fiqh, for example, if you get interested in the origins of jurisprudence, then you'll find that there are 4 main sources of evidence that all of the scholars agree to: Quran and Sunnah and Qiyas and Ijma'. Everyone agrees to those. And then there's other sources of evidence that the scholars, some of them accept this source fully with no conditions. Others accept this source conditionally. Others don't accept that source at all. There's some difference of opinion. One of the sources is Shara' man qablana, right? The law of the nations that came before us. In situations where we don't have a ruling, we don't know what to do with this. We've never seen this problem before. The Quran didn't say anything about it. The Sunnah didn't say anything about it. I have no analogies to draw here. The scholars don't really have an opinion. Now, one of the sources you can use is you can go back to the Shara' of the people before us. What in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, what did they say there? What did they do there? And then we just follow along. This is a part of this is how we incorporate things. Because for us, the Quran and the Muhammad alayhi salam didn't come. قُلْ مَا كُنْتُ بِدْعًا مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. This is where the word bid'ah came in the Quran. It's twice in the Quran. This is one of them. قُلْ مَا كُنْتُ بِدْعًا مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. Say, I'm not an innovation of a prophet. I didn't come and make things up and change everything. No, I came and taught exactly what Musa alayhi salam taught, and Isa alayhi salam taught, and Ibrahim and Nuh, same thing. And that's how we understand it. The laws differed because the people differed. And their times and their context differed. So the law would be different. That's why you have to differentiate between i'tiqad, between the principles, the values, the ethics, and fiqh. Not to say that fiqh is not important. No, it's very important. But fiqh is not of the same, it's not the same level of i'tiqad. This is the most original, authentic thing that exists in the world. It dates back to Adam alayhi salam. And before him, this is what the prophets of the jinn taught their followers. It goes before Adam alayhi salam, because these are the facts of the universe. La ilaha illallah is the fact of the world. It's how the universe is built. This is fiqh. Every prophet brought something. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا كُلَّ ذِي ظُفُرٍ وَمِنَ الْبَقَرِ وَالْغَنَمِ حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ شُحُومَهُمَا إِلَّا مَا حَمَلَتْ ظُهُورُهُمَا أَوِ الْحَوَايَا أَوْ مَا اخْتَلَطَ بِعَظْمٍ. The Quran talks about that certain things were made haram for the Yahud, and then different for the Nasara, and then different for the Muslims. Why? Because there's context. There's different experiences. People had different challenges within their lives. So the laws they brought were different. They all received revelation. All prophets and messengers received some form of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are different ways to receive revelation. I leave that for Ulum al-Quran course. Sheikh Mustafa teaches that there in more depth, so you can go back to that. I like to differentiate between 2 words, deen and diyana. Deen is a theology. Deen is the aqeeda. Diyana is the law. So inna ad-deena inda Allah al-Islam. Deen, that is a theology. That is inda Allah, it's been the same. Ad-diyana is the law, meaning the halal, the haram, the do's, the don'ts, the can'ts. Ad-diyana, this has been different. Masihiyya is a diyana, Yahudiyya is a diyana, every other religion out there is a diyana. But the deen is one. The diyanat are different. The laws differ. The deen is one. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the deen. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. He's using this term because that is what you owe God in terms of your belief system, in terms of your iman. This has never changed. The diyanat have been different historically. Because we're the last one, because there's no version after us, the diyana and the deen are given the same name. Because we're the last one, the diyana and the deen are all called Islam. Before us, Ibrahim alayhi salam called us Muslimin from a deen perspective. From a diyana perspective, he had a different law. We don't know they didn't have a specific name, but Allah. And then Musa alayhi salam, he taught the deen of Islam and the diyana of Ladina Hadu, Yahudiyya. Isa alayhi salam taught the deen of Islam and the diyana of Nasraniyya. Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, because he's the last, there's nothing else after him, it's Islam. It's all one. And this is helpful to you, so you understand reading the Quran, what's meant by that. What is he trying to explain to us, subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because this is the expectation for everyone. Monotheism, with the details that I'm explaining in theology, is an expectation regardless of where you come from, where you live, at what time. It doesn't make a difference. The difference also between Nabi and Rasul. This is multi-faceted. I mean, there's a lot of different opinions on what a Rasul is and what a Nabi. And I'm going to give you the most common or the majority opinion of what the difference is. If you're interested in this topic, you can go back and read some of the material that I have in the classroom. You can read a little bit more to know. But the majority opinion of what the difference is that the Rasul is one who brought a law. And a Nabi followed the law of a prophet, a messenger before him. Has nothing to do with books. Be very careful here. Has nothing to do with books. Has everything to do with the law. Ibrahim brought a law, alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam brought a law. Isa alayhi salam brought a law. The law is different. The fiqh was different, right? So if you brought a law, then you were called a Rasul. If you didn't bring a law, but you just followed the law of the one before you, then you were called a Nabi. Both receive revelation. Both will receive revelation. Wahy will come to them. Saying that, every Rasul can be called a Nabi, right? Every Rasul can be called a Nabi because a Rasul just has one thing extra from a Nabi, right? A prophet, every messenger just has something extra. We use Rasul for messenger for Rasul and prophet for Nabi. Don't ask me why. It's what's become the norm. But every Rasul is a Nabi because what they have extra is a law. Not every Nabi is a Rasul because they may not have their own law. So Dawood alayhi salam had the Zabur. He is not a Rasul because he didn't have a law. His law was the law of Musa alayhi salam. Even though he was given the Psalms, even though he had a Zabur, the Zabur was filled with ethical teachings. There were songs of values and principles and love, and there was no law in the Zabur. There was no saying this is halal, this is haram, this is Sabbath, none of that. That was they followed what Musa said. When Masih alayhi salam came along and he brought Injil, no, there was a variation of the law. وَلْيُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ. And Isa was sent to you to make halal for you things that were made haram for you at the time of Musa. So Isa brought a change of law. He's a Rasul. Ismail alayhi salam was a Rasul because when he was sent, when he was sent to the Arab, he brought them a law different than what Ibrahim alayhi salam brought to the people of Palestine, and Bilad al-Sham where he was teaching. So anytime they brought a law, and I think this is the majority opinion, I think is the one that makes most sense. So I think it's the correct one, but there are different opinions on what this is. Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is the final prophet and messenger. In the Quran, what do they say? Ma kana, na'am. Yeah. 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 Yeah, you could say that maybe Ibrahim didn't. There's suhuf, but we don't have a book that exists. You could say that Nuh alayhi salam didn't. We don't know. Like I don't know. Maybe he did have a book. I just don't know. So I don't know. I can't say for sure. But I'm saying that the difference between Rasul and Nabi is not whether they had a book or not. This is a common understanding from what the scholars said is wrong. The ulama didn't say that. They said he had a book, as in the word kitab as in a law, sharia. Not that he had a book, because the book, Dawood alayhi salam was given a book, but it had no law in it, so he was not considered a Rasul, right? But Ibrahim and Nuh alayhi salam, I don't know what they had. I know that Ibrahim had suhuf fi suhuf Ibrahim. I don't know what Nuh had. I don't have it anywhere. I know he's a Rasul. I just don't know what he had. Like I don't know what exactly he can, because Sheeth alayhi salam was a Rasul before him. I don't know what Nuh was granted, but I don't. But he could have had a book. He may not have a book, meaning he just brought a law. He just said, "Here's the law," with no actual scripture from God. Yeah, he's a Rasul, but I just don't know what the book was, or if he had a book or not. But he had a law. I know that he had a law. That's accepted. Yeah. So when you talk about
benefit for us knowing whether a figure was a Rasul or a prophet?
It's just when you're reading the word in the Quran to have an idea of what the difference is. And I think and the meaning is just the reason is just this last piece here. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين. He's the final Nabi. He's the final Nabi. Now, if you understand, if he said وخاتم الرسل, that means there's a possibility there's going to be a Nabi after him. Understand what I'm saying? If he said وخاتم الرسل, he's the last Rasul, then maybe there's going to be a Nabi who doesn't have Allah, who comes after him, which is what the Qadianiyya and the Ahmadiyya and all the other groups decided. But he said وخاتم النبيين, the final Nabi. There's nothing after him. Meaning there's no revelation that's going to come after him. You can't, if he's the last Nabi, you can't have a Rasul after him because a Rasul is already a Nabi as well. So he used that term subhanahu wa ta'ala because that's it. There's no more revelation to actually follow. وَلَكِنْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ. Just to understand that why, explain this so you understood this ayah, why it's put in that form. He is the messenger of Allah, he brought Allah, وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ, the last person to receive revelation. And this is important because, again, our brothers from the other sects of Islamic law, who decide that the Sayyid or whatever, the Imam, receives revelation of some sort. No one receives revelation. Jibreel stopped bringing. He stopped doing this. He doesn't bring any more teachings. He doesn't come and tell people what's halal and haram. By the way, the papacy is based on that. The papacy claims, and they don't say this out loud. You can read it in their chronicles, and you can read it. They claim that the Pope receives revelation. The Pope has authority to make things halal and haram within Catholicism. He can make a decision that this is halal and this is haram. No one in Islam can do that. Imagine if we tried to do that. Imagine if I said, 1 second here. It's fine. Khalas. Of course not. You ask a question, I have to give you evidence to support it. If I don't give you evidence to support it, then you'll say I'm wrong. Even though maybe you have never studied and I studied all my life. If I don't give you evidence that makes sense, you can tell me I'm wrong. Because Islam is not based on revelation after Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. It's based on evidence. Right? And that's how Islam has actually been preserved. Our brothers and sisters on the other side, look at their practices, you find it's not similar. They've lost a lot of the Islamic identity. Why? Because their leaders can just decide that this behavior is now okay. Even though there is revelation, there's Quran that's saying that it's not. Or even though we know the Prophet ﷺ said you can't do that. And they can make a decision. No, not in our deen. No one can make that decision. You have to follow evidence. You have to make logical arguments that make sense. And your peers have to be able to, and human beings are logical in general. So if you make a proper argument, they'll listen to you. If you make a garbage argument, then the bad arguments fizzle out with time. They lose their effect with time, which is why a lot of modern day religions just slowly kind of just leave them. Time will take care of it because things that make no sense won't exist. For us as Muslims, the opposite. Islam is always growing. There's always more people accepting Islam. There's more. The reason being is that when you understand, actually, the problem is the opposite. Our problem is that people don't know the argument properly. If you did, then you have no problem. You'd be very, very comfortable within your skin as you learn it. So the Ash'aris, to kind of learn something here, I think it's an important piece, just in case you hear it. The Ash'aris, Imam Qurtubi, Imam Malik, rahimahullah, Imam Malik ibn Anas, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, took the opinion that women could be prophets. Their opinion was that a woman can be a Nabi, right? And that there were women who were prophets, and amongst them were Maryam alayhi salam. All of the schools of creed agree that there were no women who were rusul, who were given laws, right? And the majority opinion within Islamic theology is that there were no women anbiya either. That people would receive, that certain women would receive ilham, not revelation specifically. So, for example, Musa alayhi salam, when she saw in her dream, Maryam alayhi salam, when she had the encounter with Jibreel, they had specific context to this to say that this is not necessarily prophecy, but rather a certain degree of sainthood that is special. And both opinions are fine. Like I don't have it. It doesn't matter to me either way. I just want you to know that there's a difference. But maybe that some scholars will, and it's not a few of them. There's a reasonable. The Ash'aris are a large group, and they see Musa and Maryam and other to be anbiya, nabiyat. Meaning they were granted prophecy, but they just were not granted messenger. Allah. For many reasons, historically, women to carry a law, to come to people with a different law was going to be a disaster for them, but just because of the social construct of things. But as prophecy, I think it's a reasonable thought to entertain. The issue of the miracles granted to prophets. So this is, to me, a big one. and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it because I think it's important. I think it has a real effect on your understanding of the nubuwwah, the prophecy of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. I think it has an effect on on the way you actually take your iman. I wouldn't talk about it if I didn't think it actually affected the way we understand things. So what is the word mu'jiza or ayah or sultan or burhan? These are all the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses to describe what he grants his prophets and messengers. He uses these words. The word mu'jiza is the word that is used more, maybe I guess modernly, like in modern years, the last maybe couple of centuries, they use the word mu'jiza. The Quran uses ayah, sultan, burhan, bayyina. قَدْ جَاءَتْكُمْ بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ هَذِهِ نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ لَكُمْ آيَةٌ. So these different words. In English, let's just take the word miracle because I think it's the one that we can connect or relate to. So it's an extraordinary event that prophets would be granted and would use to challenge, and I've kind of put that in bold to challenge those who refuse their prophecy. So an ayah for prophets, the goal of having it, whatever the ayah was, Musa alayhi salam's staff and his hand, Salih alayhi salam with the naqa, right? Isa alayhi salam with resurrecting the dead and walking on water and all the things that Isa alayhi salam did, speaking in his infancy. All of the mu'jizat that they had, the goal of it was to use it to challenge the people who are saying that they're fraudulent, that they were frauds. So the prophets would come and say, we're not frauds. Here's evidence. And anytime they were asked to present or produce the ayah, they would produce the ayah every time to challenge people. That is the definition that the scholars have accepted or have put together for a mu'jiza, for an ayah, for a bayyinah. So the question becomes, did Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam have a miracle based on that definition that I just gave you? Did he actually have a miracle based on that definition? The majority of opinion is yes. And the majority opinion for people is yes. I heavily disagree with this. I heavily disagree with this. The Prophet ﷺ's only miracle that he used to challenge his people was the Quran. It's the only thing he ever used to challenge people. I'm going back to the definition. The only thing he used to challenge people was the book. And the book does that many. فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ إِن كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. Right? He started with that. قل فأتوا بعشر سور مثله قل فأتوا بكتاب من عند الله هو أهدى منهما أتبعه إن كنتم صادقين قل فأتوا بعشر سور مثله مفتريات قل فأتوا بسورة مثله فأتوا بسورة من مثله. So the Quran started by bringing a way of life. You can't bring a book. You can't bring 10 surahs. You can't bring one surah. You can't bring some part of a surah. Bring anything. Bring anything that is similar to this. That is of the same degree of profoundness. That is the same degree of logic and philosophy and teaching and guidance, and is artistic and is connected and in synchrony with it. Bring something, produce something that is not based on it, that is different, that will have the same impact and effect, and they couldn't. And the Arab could not bring something forward similar to the Quran. Everything else, all of the other extraordinary occurrences that happened, and I tell these stories in Sirah all the time. I tell how the Prophet يمسح على عين قتادة he could see again. يمسح على عين علي فتبرأ. He puts his hand في البئر. The water comes gushing from the well. He would all these things that he did عليه السلام طعام في بيت جابر. He would he fed the army from a little bit of food in Jabir's house. All these narrations that we have in the Sunnah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, we know, but are these miracles? Like probably the most famous of them all is the moon. By the way, that ayah has nothing to do with that story. Has nothing to do with that story at all. That ayah is talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah. But aside from that, the story itself is in Sahih Muslim. Ibn Mas'ud tells us about it. The problem with the story is that he didn't use this to challenge the mushrikeen. He never reproduced it, alayhi salatu wasalam, right? To call that a miracle, to me, is a problem. It's a problem because we are misusing the definition that we have. These are dala'il nubuwwah. And why do I say that? Is because that's what Imam al-Bayhaqi and Imam al-Shafi'i and many of the scholars of that era would call these things. There's a book called Dala'il al-Nubuwwah written by Imam al-Bayhaqi where he goes through all of the extraordinary events that happened during his life, alayhi salatu wasallam, the things that people use as proofs of prophecy. As proofs of prophecy. These most of the time, if not all the time, happened in the presence of the Muslims. It was used to strengthen the iman of the Muslims, not to actually challenge the disbelievers. And if a disbeliever saw something or witnessed something, it would be a one-time thing. Musa alayhi salam threw the staff as many times as he was asked for. He pulled his hand out of his pocket with that as many times as he needed, alayhi salam. Isa alayhi salam did the same thing because they used them to challenge. They were there to challenge the disbelievers. This is not my definition, the definition of the scholars. The Prophet alayhi salam, the only thing he challenged with was the Quran. That's one thing. The second problem, this is the real problem, is that if we become too adamant, and I look, the majority opinion is that there are that the Prophet had other miracles. I accept that. I'm not lying to you. That's the majority opinion. I just heavily disagree with it. I don't think it's correct. And the examples are splitting the moon, running. I think all of these are Dalal al-Nubuwwah, as Imam Bayhaqi put in his collection, as had many scholars have agreed to. The reason that I think this is a problem is that it's almost saying, well, it's not almost saying, the Quran it talks about this. وقالوا لن نؤمن لك حتى تفجر لنا من الأرض ينبوعا أو تسقط السماء كما زعمت علينا كسفا أو تأتي بالله والملائكة قبيلا أو يكون لك بيت من زخرف أو ترقى في السماء ولن نؤمن لرقيك حتى تنزل علينا كتابا نقرأ قل سبحان ربي هل كنت إلا بشرا رسولا. They would argue and say we won't believe into you until you fill the desert with green and water, or you end up or all of the treasures of the sands come out to you and you become rich, or you build a great castle, or you elevate into the sky and the malaika shake your hand up there and the Jibreel brings down the book, all of these crazy stuff. And if you read within the Quran, وقالوا لولا يأتينا بآية من ربه أو بآيات من ربه قل إنما الآيات عند الله. This ayah to me is like ends the discussion. I don't know why. It's not the majority opinion, but I don't know why this is a difficult topic to make. I think because scholars in the back in the day, they didn't really care for this differentiation that I am offering you. They're like, yeah, mu'jiza. They didn't think, or they didn't use the word in a way where they thought that this was going to cause a problem. So I think, wallahu alam, if scholars, the same scholars who see this majority opinion, if they were listening today to how this is being used, they would be on, they would agree with what I'm saying here today. Because when you have to claim that the Prophet ﷺ did something else, it's almost saying that the Quran is not enough. It's like you're saying the Quran wasn't enough. Well, in Surah Al-Ankabut, when they said this, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَاتٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ قُلْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. Say, when they said, why doesn't he bring us like every other prophet, like Musa and Isa, where is your mu'jiza? Give us. And they came to him, Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah and Amr ibn al-As and others. They came and they said, look, well, ya ibn akhi, we'll accept you, just give us something to work with. And he said, وَمَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نَأْتِيَكُمْ بِسُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. I only bring you whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا يَأْتِينَا بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ قُلْ. This is what Allah told the Prophet ﷺ to say. إِنَّمَا الْآيَاتُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Exclusively these miracles are something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّمَا أَنَا نَذِيرٌ مُبِينٌ. And I'm only a messenger, a prophet that brings warnings and information. The ayah after it. أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِهِمْ أَنَّا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ. Was it not enough for them that we sent the book upon you to recite it upon you? So that's what the Quran says. That's what the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Quran. The Quran, the book was enough. We didn't need to send you anything else. وَمَا مَنَعَنَا أَن نُرْسِلَ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا أَن كَذَّبَ بِهَا الْأَوَّلُونَ وَآتَيْنَا ثَمُودَ النَّاقَةَ مُبْصِرَةً فَظَلَمُوا بِهَا وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. In another Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the only reason that we don't keep on sending these miracles, these extraordinary phenomena, is because all of the nations before you did not accept them. And we gave Thamud, which is Salih's people, a naqa. They saw Mubasira was very clear. They watched it emerge from the boulder. It was the biggest creature they'd ever seen in their lives. It lived with them. It drank their water. It ate their food. They saw it. فَظَلَمُوا بِهَا. They didn't do well with it. وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. The last piece is that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a miracle of that sort and the people don't believe, what happens? Yes. That's where ألا بعدا لمدين ألا بعدا لثمود ألا بعدا لعاد قوم هود ألا بعد. They're going to be punished. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ, your people will not be punished. They'll take care of that. They'll do that to themselves. I won't do it to them. So he didn't give the Prophet ﷺ anything that was physical. He gave him the Quran. The miracle is you when you accept it. The miracle is you when you learn the Quran, live the Quran. That's the miracle. The miracle in Islam is the human being who is capable of taking in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him, living it, embracing it, learning from it, and then transforming into a person that was capable of that which he was not capable of beforehand. That is the miracle. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam in this deen. And to me, that is the miracle of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. It was the transformation of Ibn Mas'ud and Abu Bakr and Sa'id and Zubayr and Talha, and it was Abu Dharr. It was a transformation of these people from a lifestyle to another one. It was the transformation of the people in this resourceless area, in this space in the world that no one cared for because nothing of value had ever emerged from this dead desert, and the people who lived in it, who could not stop killing each other. And yet the most pure message of ethics and principles and values emerged. That's the miracle. That's what he did, alayhi salatu wasalam. That is what is valuable. So when we get too caught up, no, we had a miracle in the moon and the split, and then of course you have to go and follow along and show me pieces of research of how they went to the moon and they saw like where it was. Please stop, I beg you, Abu Sida, please stop. Just stop, just for the sanity of everyone in the room. We don't. Why do you feel like you need this? Wallahi, you do not need this. It hurts me when I see people so insecure about their faith that they need to know that happened, and the way they think it happened. Of course, it did, and they saw something. What they saw and what that meant, I don't know. But we don't need that as basis for our faith by any means. I don't need any of that. Why? Because I have the Quran. I have the Quran, the ongoing miracle. And I watched the Quran. I lived with people. I saw people who the Quran had taken from one state to the other. And we continue to try and let the Quran do that to ourselves and to others. And that's it. So just keep that in mind in case you get to, don't worry about it. Enjoy the proofs of prophecy. They're beautiful. They're beautiful stories. Wallahi, they are. They move your heart because you get to see a part of him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that you don't get to, but you don't need that to accept his prophecy. He didn't need it. It was his akhlaq, it was his character, it was that's what it was. The book it was the Quran and what it taught that moved people, that changed people. It wasn't, and this is the main difference between Islam and all of the prophecies before, is that our miracle was going to be a book. It was going to be knowledge. Our ummah is going to be embedded, like the message of it, the core message was going to be embedded in knowledge. Ya akhi, what's more? I don't know what's more beautiful than that. I really don't. I really don't understand what's more beautiful than that. If it was just an extraordinary phenomenon, if he was like Thor, and he's throwing lightning bolts and stuff and whatever, of course. Imagine two people walk into this room. One of them, and they're both claiming prophecy. One of them, he splits the atom, throws the roof up, takes me, sends me into space, brings me back. And another guy walks in and shows you a book. Imagine who are you going to have more difficulty fending? The guy who's splitting, the other guy with the book, take your book. He still did it, alayhi salatu wasalam, with a book. You understand? He did it with a book. That's all he came with. He couldn't even read, alayhi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the beauty of what we have. This is why it's important to understand these things. Because if you get caught up on the other stuff, then you lose one of the most valuable, precious aspects of what Islam is. So it's a deen that was built on iqra. You're going to learn, you're going to read, you're going to grow, and then you're going to be the miracle. And we're not going to need to send the jarad and the qum and the dhafaj and all that other stuff. You don't need that stuff. So don't go back and fall into the same trap. No, he did this. I know he did, but that wasn't it. That's not it. It wasn't used to challenge. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, so Iman in his books. Let's go to Iman bil Kutub. These are all quick. Like I said, today we'll get through all of them. The bulk of the work will be on Iman bil Qadr. That's where we're going to spend most of the time, because I want to make sure everyone ends up at the end very, very comfortable with this topic, and that they don't have like a million questions and they're still not struggling with the ideas. So Iman in his books, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent many revelations, many. Some of them were books like the Quran, others were like the Zabur, the Psalms, just things that short verses of song. Some of them were like the Suhuf of Sheath. Each one was its own category, its own revelation. Many different forms. We don't know all of the forms even ourselves. If you want to know some of these forms, study the Torah a little bit later on in your life. You read it maybe once, or read the Injil. You'll see that there's a lot of similarities between the Quran and the Torah and the Injil, and you also find that the structure is a little bit different in those books. So, and he sent these different revelations, subhanahu wa ta'ala. We accept the Zabur, the Psalms of Dawood alayhi salam, David, the Torah, the Old Testament of Musa alayhi salam, Moses, the Injil, the Bible or New Testament. And I know there's a difference of opinion on using these terms. I'm not interested in that in this course, but I'm just putting out the words that are usually used of Jesus alayhi salam, and the Holy Quran of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In addition to that, the Suhuf Ibrahim, because it's in the Quran, Suhuf Ibrahim. We don't know exactly what was in them. We just know within them أم لم ينبأ بما في صحف موسى وإبراهيم الذي وفى ألا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى وأن سعيه سوف يرى ثم يجزاه الجزاء الأوفى وأن إلى ربك المنتهى. So we know that these were in the books of the Suhuf of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but we don't know the details of what the Suhuf looked like and how many of them were he had and who did he give them to after he died. I don't know any of that stuff. Nuh alayhi salam, we know that he had some form of law and revelation. We know that Sheeth alayhi salam was given 50 out of the 140 books that were sent. And 50 of it. Because why? Because right at the beginning, Sheeth alayhi salam being the first prophet, right, one of the earliest ones, he is Adam alayhi salam's son, Seth, as you find him in the Old Testament, was granted the most laws because humanity was raw and they need to be taught as many laws as possible. Same stuff that we were being taught. We believe in the Suhuf of Ibrahim and Sheeth before him. All these books preach the same creed. All of these books were either lost or manipulated by the hand of man. The Bible, just to understand, is not claimed to be the word of Jesus. Forget about being the word of God. It's not even claimed to be the word of Jesus. The Bible is the recollection of his apostles. That's all. It's what they remembered. That's why the book of John, the book of this, and the book of him, and the book of him, it's just what they remembered, right? It's like one of the Sahaba telling us in one sitting what they remembered of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, all in one sitting, with no authentic chain of narration attached to it. What is that valuable to us in? Like if you gave me, قال يعني عمر بن الخطاب, and maybe like 50 pages about him talking, and there's no chain of narration. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to burn it. It's completely useless. Actually, I don't want to learn it because I can't verify any of it. So what they have are just the recollection, the testimony of people who are with Isa alayhi salam, without being able to authenticate that this is actually what they said. Forget about being what Jesus said or what God said. We can't even authenticate that they said it. I'm not interested in these type of arguments with other faiths because to me it ended before it began. Every letter in the Quran is authenticated back to the mouth of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Every letter. You study the Quran, you study the qira'at, you know that so you're reciting it exactly how he did alayhi salatu. We don't let you stand up in front and here unless you were reciting it as he did. If you stand up here and you make a few mistakes where you're reciting it differently than he did, we put you aside. We make someone else. You have to recite the way he did alayhi salatu wasalam. Exactly. That's how much we care for this. Recollections of Sahaba of the Prophet alayhi salatu, it has to be, that's what a hadith is. You have to authenticate it. And if it's not authentic, we say, thank you. We're good. We're not interested in listening to it because we don't know. You have to. So it's different. All the books were lost and manipulated. But we believe that the Torah is the book of Allah, that the Injil is the book of Allah. So you respect it. As a Muslim, you never desiccate these books or disrespect them or allow others to do this to them. Because you know somewhere in these books is the remnant of the word of God. In those books, somewhere in them, there are going to be remnants, going to be phrases that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in his book. So we respect that. Even if they're lost amongst a lot of other stuff, but we respect that. So we all have to kind of remember that. Abrogation is a part of the transition process over time. Again, you'll learn this a little bit more in Usul Fiqh and in Ulum al-Quran, but the concept of naskh or abrogation is the process through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send prophets. Meaning, Musa alayhi salam came to Israel, and then his Shariah's time was up, so Isa alayhi salam was sent. So that he would abrogate parts of that Sharia and come up with something new. Of course, the Jews refused him, so they ended up not. Muhammad alayhi salam abrogates with his Sharia the laws that came before him, not the creed. The creed is the same, it's just the laws he's abrogating. So the books will abrogate one another, right? Not based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wal-iyadu billah, jalla jalalullah, changing his mind. No, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's more the fact that we change. It's not that Allah who changes. We're the ones who change. The Torah, the Injil, the Quran, the Zabur, these are kalamullah, divine. They're all divine. They're the essence of the meanings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. They all are not makhluk, and they are all divine in nature. Why are they different? Because we're different. Not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's because we are. The difference between them is not based on the source, it's based on the receivers, the recipient. I am different, but the spirit of each of these books and what they taught are exactly the same. What Musa alayhi salam's book taught to Bani Israel and what Isa's book taught and what Muhammad alayhi salam's book taught is the same thing. Just the context is different. The stories are different. The details are different. But the values and the principles and the ethics and the message, exactly the same because that's divine. I hope that makes sense to you. So let's talk about this because perfect. Okay, so the unworn is just a category that you should know about because I think it's important. It doesn't really fall under anything, but I just put it here because I think it's important. So the Athari school, and the Ash'ari school, they agree that people who are not warned by prophets or have the message, for example, misrepresented to them, will not be accountable for Iman Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is agreed upon amongst the majority of Muslim scholars. So the Athari school and the Ash'ari school. It's only the Maturidiyya who don't agree with this. And I will talk about this maybe in the second level, why they disagree. It's an interesting argument that they make. It's an interesting argument. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree, but there is room for difference of opinion here. But it's an interesting argument of what they make here. But those who carried the message are. The people who carried the message are accountable. The people who are spreading the message are accountable. The people receiving, this is how far they go in this argument. That if you are living on the top of a mountain and a prophet is sent in the footsteps of a mountain, you don't have to go down and listen to him if he doesn't come up to you. And you're not accountable to that degree. Their argument was to that degree, that you are not responsible to go, this is not, if it comes to you, then you have to listen. And you have to start using your brain. If it doesn't, then you're not accountable for that message. You'll still be accountable for good and bad because that... فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا, right? يره. Why? Because we all have the compass inside in terms of good and bad. Good and bad we understand. We don't need necessarily religion to tell us what was good and what was bad. We all know what's good and bad. There's almost no exceptions to that. The Maturidiyya and the Mu'tazila, with obviously difference between them on this topic, so they don't have the exact same opinion, see that a person does not need a prophet to have general iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That they feel that you don't need nubuwwah or risala or kitab. You don't need any of those things to establish basic iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And since you don't need that, then you are going to be still accountable for your iman yawm al-qiyamah. That's how they see things. Now, the majority of scholars don't agree with that. Your iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires revelation. But it's an interesting argument to listen to both make. But the majority opinion is that if you were never warned, then you're not really accountable for iman. Which is why it's important to understand that we carry a specific responsibility to representing Islam appropriately to others. Because if they don't accept Islam, either they are accountable or I am. One of us is accountable for this. There's going to be accountability. So if I don't want it to be on me, then I have to do my thing right. I have to make sure that I represent it physically correctly and vocally and verbally correctly. I have to have the right narrative and I have to write a personal representation for it. Because if I don't do that, then they could make the argument that it was misrepresented. The way that it was shown to us, what we saw from the Muslims was bad behaviors, bad ethics, bad this and bad that, and they acted like this and they behaved like that. Why would they want to be Muslim? And then we're going to have a very difficult time in terms of refuting that argument unless we have actually made the changes that are required of us. If the Sahaba were not people of great principles and great values and great ethics, then Islam would have not really left Medina or Mecca, I can tell you that much. But because they were, this is why today we sit here as Muslims, and that responsibility still lies on us. The reason that they differ on this topic, and I just give you this little piece, why they differ on whether you're accountable for general iman versus you're not accountable for general iman without prophecy, is based on their definition of al-husn or al-hasan wal-qabih, al-husn wal-qubh, which is good and bad. So Maturidiyya say that the word good and the word bad are defined or produced from intellect. You don't need guidance to define good and bad. The Athari and the Ash'ari school say no. Even good and bad require an ethical standard that can only be provided by revelation. You need revelation to provide that ethical standard. So if you don't have revelation, you can't have, you don't know what good and bad are, so you can't be held accountable for Allah. The Maturidi say no. Good and bad is something that the intellect will produce on its own. So you don't need that for that. And that's kind of where the argument stems from. So it's an interesting one if you care about this topic. Let's talk about this for a little bit. We'll end obviously before, we won't finish it, but just something to start talking about. Categories of people. Now, again, these are not what I'm sharing with you here. If we were living a couple of hundred years ago, a few hundred years ago, these probably would not exist in a first level Aqeeda course. The reason I'm sharing them with you is because I think they're impactful on modern day Iman. Like I think people who are mu'min today or Muslims run into these theological problems commonly or often. So I'm just bringing them up. I don't think that they're necessary for a primary level course of Aqeeda. I really don't. But because of the question coming up all the time, commonly, I think it's worth at least covering for you so you have a narrative. So how do we see people as Muslims alive and in this dunya and then in akhirah? In this life, people are either a Muslim or non-Muslim. That's it. It's very simple. Either you're Muslim, and that's going to be based on the fact that you say that you're Muslim and you have the basics, meaning you say you're Muslim. Do you believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah? Yes. Okay. Your Qibla the same, Quran the same. We're good. We can differ on a lot of other stuff, but you're still Muslim. If you don't, then you're not Muslim. This is not a curse word. Not being Muslim, I'm not cursing you. You're kafir. No, it's just categorizing. I'm Muslim and you're not. Meaning we have different ways of seeing things. There are many different types of non-Muslims. There are polytheists, atheists. There are believers in other gods, kuffar. There is refuser, someone who is anti-Islam, like someone who is an enemy to you, a jahid, a mukathib, right? There are people who have other books like Christians and Jews and Majus and Buddhists and etc. There are those who are combative, muharibin, those who are oppressing you and taking your land and killing you. So these are the different types of non-Muslims. They're not all the same. You're not treated all the same. They're not seen all the same. And the rulings regarding how to deal with them is not the same. However, a rule of thumb, like an umbrella rule for all of them, is that we deal with all non-Muslims. I'm not talking about Muslims because we already know that. We already know إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, right? فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخْوَيْكُمْ and all that stuff. We already know these issues about how you're supposed to deal with your Muslim brother and sister. I'm not going to explain that to you. I hope I don't have to. Non-Muslims, we treat them justly. We treat them fairly. We treat them with excellence. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين, without forming alliances or political allegiances against other Muslims. So the key is you never form a political allegiance with a non-Muslim against a Muslim brother. Like you don't do that. You always stand by your Muslim brothers and sisters. Combatives specifically, non-Muslims who are combative, meaning who are carrying bearing arms and trying to kill you and oppressing you and taking your land and etc. etc. They must be fought against and shown animosity until they stop their oppression. Here's the rule. You're obligated to combat them and to fight them and to push back against them until they stop. Once they stop, then you offer, you go back again. You go back to being the same way you were. That's why for us, Ahl Kitab lived within the Muslim Khilaf and the Muslim world. They lived and they had all the rights everyone else had, and they enjoyed the freedom of their religion, the freedom of, and they held office and they did everything. Well, what about jizya? Jizya was a way for them not to go to the army. They didn't serve in the army. Like so, a Nasrani, a Majusi, a Yehudi they didn't have to go to. All Muslim young men were obligated to go when they were called upon, but they were not. They paid something called jizya for that. It was the equivalent of their army service and taxes and zakat. As a Muslim, you had to do dariba, you had to offer your the kharaj, you had to offer your zakah, and you had to go and fight when needed. All three things, jizya was made up for them. That's what jizya is. Just so if you're interested in understanding what the word comes from, that's what it substituted all three for if you were to be Muslim, and not everyone had to pay it. Only those who actually could afford to pay it. I'm going to end with that. I'll continue explaining this topic inshallah ta'ala next week. Subhanallah bihamdika la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Jazakumullahu khayr. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.